Thanks to Supremacy World War III for sponsoring this video. Have you ever wondered what it's really like to lead a nation through the chaos of modern global warfare? Well, thanks to Supremacy World War III, now you can find out. Supremacy World War III is a free online real-time strategy game that puts you in control of a real-world nation during a full-scale international conflict. You'll be managing your economy, expanding your research tree, and commanding over 100 modern military units, from tanks and jets to submarines and missile systems, across intense matches that can last for weeks. What I love is how strategic this game gets. You're not just fighting, you're forging alliances, crafting long-term plans, and deciding whether to go full aggression or play the diplomacy game. And with cross-platform support, your battle continues seamlessly, whether you're on mobile or desktop. And here's the best part. For a limited time, new players who sign up through the link in the description will get an exclusive starter pack that includes one seasonal unit of the main battle tank valued at $25. But this offer is only available for the next 30 days, so don't wait to take command. Tracer fire rips across Polish fields. Cheap drones scream over the front, slamming into trenches. On a Lithuanian highway, opposing tank columns thunder toward a single stretch of asphalt. Across Estonia, city lights die as the grid buckles. In Brussels, an emergency NATO council weighs lives and history and consequences. It hasn't happened yet, but on today's episode of the Infographics Show, we're going to show you why war between NATO and Russia might be closer than you think. Forget Kyiv. The real flashpoints for a war between NATO and Russia aren't in Ukraine. They are at the points where NATO and Russia physically touch. Since September 9, 2025, Russian drones have violated NATO airspace over Poland up to 23 times in a single night. They slipped into Romanian territory on multiple occasions, lingered in Allied skies for nearly 50 minutes, and forced F-16s from several countries to scramble. Romania has recorded 11 drone violations since 2022, but the pace has surged dramatically in recent weeks. In one September incident, a Russian drone flew several miles into Romanian territory, tracked by Romanian F-16s, until it disappeared from radar close to the Ukrainian border. The question that probably kept some Romanian general up that night was whether to shoot it down or not. It might help to think about it like this. If a stranger walks into your house by accident, you probably won't shoot them, right? If they walk in 3 times, you start wondering if it's really an accident. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been blunt about it. He claims the Russian military knows exactly where their drones are headed and how long they can operate in the air. Their routes are always calculated. This can't be a coincidence or the misplaced initiative of some lower-level commanders. Even still, U.S. and Western intelligence officials have been unable to determine whether those incursions are accidental or intentional. One senior U.S. military official deployed to the region estimated the odds of Russia intentionally entering NATO airspace at 50-50. The bottom line is that if you can't agree on whether something is an honest accident or an act of war, you are already in dangerous territory. And if you're the pilot or the air defense commander, you are stuck between terrible options. Shoot it down and you just destroyed Russian military property. That is exactly what happened on September 9th to the 10th when Polish and Dutch F-35 fighters took down at least 3 Russian drones over Poland. It marked the first time NATO has fired shots at Russian assets over its own territory since the start of Russia's war in Ukraine. And then again, if you let it fly through, you've shown that NATO airspace isn't really NATO airspace, or a red line of much meaning. It's more of a geopolitical suggestion, which could prove problematic for alliance solidarity and deterrence. There are levels to the geographic fault lines between NATO and Russia. Recently, the Black Sea has become this weird zone where NATO is getting stronger. The port of Constanta in Romania is now a major logistics hub and poised to become one of NATO's largest military bases in the coming years. There are more NATO ships than ever patrolling those waters, but it's also more vulnerable than it's ever been. While Romania is yet to shoot down any Russian drones over its own territory, but every one that crosses a border, every Russian fighter that accidentally locks radar on a NATO surveillance plane, every fishing boat that turns out to be bristling with electronic warfare gear, each one is another data point in a pattern that looks less like accidents and more like testing. Testing for what? Testing how much Europe will tolerate before it reacts. Testing where the actual red line is versus where you say it is. As one Carnegie Endowment analyst put it, Moscow is feeling out opportunities to inflict a kind of hybrid military propaganda defeat on the collective West itself, Europe and NATO, and in that roundabout way on Ukraine. It's like poking a balloon with a needle to see how much pressure it'll take to pop. If the Black Sea is tense, the Baltic is absurd. 3 Russian MiG-31 combat aircraft entered Estonian airspace for 12 minutes in September 2025, flying in transit toward Kaliningrad. The Estonian foreign minister called the incursion unprecedentedly brazen. Russia has violated Estonian airspace on 4 occasions in 2025 alone. In practice, this kind of behavior has real consequences. It forces Norwegian, Polish, and Swedish pilots on quick reaction alert duty to wait on the tarmac next to jets loaded with real missiles, waiting for an alarm to go off. When it does, they have to scramble and be airborne in under 15 minutes. When NATO scrambled on September 9th and 10th, the response involved Polish F-16s, Dutch F-35s, Italian AWACS aircraft, NATO multi-role tanker transports, and German Patriot defense systems. All of this multinational machinery airborne in minutes. Sometimes the Russians are known to play games on these sorties. They will turn toward you suddenly or drop altitude, like they're practicing a bombing run on your position. It's called shouldering, using your aircraft to physically intimidate the other guy. And you're doing this all at speeds where one bad gust of wind or one twitchy hand from a mid-air collision would kill everyone involved and quite possibly start a war. But why is the Baltic so volatile? Well, it comes down to the most important piece of real estate in Europe. If you said Paris or Berlin, well, you're thinking too big. If you said Kyiv, you're in the wrong war. The answer is a stretch of highway and farmland in northeastern Poland that most people have never even heard of, the Suwałki Gap. It's about 40 miles long, a narrow corridor of Polish territory squeezed in between Belarus to the south and the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad to the north. And it is the only land route connecting the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania to the rest of NATO. Why does this gap matter? Because of Kaliningrad. For Russia, it's a fortified island bristling with missiles and naval bases. For NATO, it's a dagger pointed at the heart of the alliance, and neither side can afford to not take it seriously. Sweden and Finland joining NATO in 2023 and 24 essentially turned the Baltics into a NATO lake. Russia's response? These were limited to some tweets by former President Dmitry Medvedev and an outdoor exhibition in Moscow about Finnish imperialism. But if you're sitting in Moscow, that is terrifying. You went from having a buffer to being surrounded on all sides. And then, in late September 2025, something new happened. Something that made even the Baltic incursions look almost routine by comparison. On the night of September 22nd, mysterious drones shut down Copenhagen Airport, Scandinavia's busiest, for nearly 4 hours. That same night, Oslo Airport in Norway was also forced to close for 3 hours after a drone sighting. Coincidence? Maybe not. 2 days later, it happened again. Aalborg Airport in northern Denmark, which also happens to host a military airbase, was shut down after multiple drone sightings. Within minutes, police received reports of drones near airports at Sundeberg, Esbjerg, and Skjerdstrup. Skjerdstrup is the main base for Danish F-16s and F-35 jets, the literal front line of NATO air defense. Someone flew drones over it, multiple drones, while Danish authorities were watching. The Danish Prime Minister called it the most dangerous attack yet on the country's critical infrastructure. The Danish Defense Minister was even more direct, hinting that this systematic operation was the work of a professional actor. It amounted to nothing less than a hybrid attack. So, who did it? Well, nobody has been caught red-handed. The Kremlin naturally said something like, "What, us?" Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov brushed off the allegations, claiming that making unfounded accusations over and over again just makes people stop taking you seriously. That is exactly what you would say if you were innocent, but it's also exactly what you would say if you were guilty and you wanted to sound dismissive. The mystery got even more interesting when Danish investigators found 3 ships with Russian links in the area at the same time. There was the Astral 1 sailing under the Russian flag, the Oslo Carrier 3 with Russian-speaking crew, and an owner with a recruitment office in Kaliningrad, and the Pushpa, an oil tanker that is part of Russia's sanctions-evading shadow fleet. All 3 were off of the Danish coast when the drone started flying. The Danes were convinced the Russians were behind it. Denmark's national intelligence chief went on the record to say that basically this was only the beginning. Europe could expect more of the same. None of these were hobby drones. They could only be controlled by someone with advanced gear, likely operating from the ships in international waters, coordinating drone flights over multiple high-value targets all at once. It's the kind of thing that requires planning, coordination, equipment, and personnel who know what they're doing. In other words, all the things Russia has in spades. If you wanted to cripple a country's air defenses and transport network without firing a shot, this is the drill you would run. You fly the drones, you map their response times, you watch how long it takes to mobilize, you learn what they can and can't detect. And then, if you ever need that information for real, well, you get the picture. The Danes considered invoking Article 4 of the NATO Treaty, the clause that lets a member request consultations when they feel threatened, and as a result, they have been given full authorization to shoot down any threatening drones in future incidents. NATO's response as a whole was arguably even more notable. They launched Operation Eastern Sentry, deploying Danish F-16s, a Danish anti-air warfare frigate, French Rafale jets, German Eurofighter aircraft, and counter-drone sensors and weapons to the region. It all amounts to a full-fledged multinational air patrol campaign, triggered by drones that nobody can officially prove came from Russia. If the drone incursions sound unsettling, what's happening beneath the waves on NATO's eastern flank is worse. In October 2023, the Baltic Connector pipeline, a critical gas link between Finland and Estonia, was severed, cut clean through. A Chinese container ship called the Nunu Polar Bear dragged its anchor for 112 miles along the seabed. It's not exactly a thing that ships normally do unless something has gone catastrophically wrong. Along the way, it unironically tore up the pipeline and several telecom cables. Chinese ship, sure, but one that was acting suspiciously like it was doing Russia a favor, since Russia has every reason to want European energy infrastructure disrupted. Then, in November 2024, it happened again. 2 undersea cables in the Baltic, one connecting Finland to Germany, another linking Sweden to Lithuania, were both cut within 24 hours of each other. Another Chinese vessel, Yipeng 3, was in the area. This time, Swedish and Danish police surrounded the ship and escorted it to port. The world has never been more connected, and that's exactly what makes it so easy to break. 95% of intercontinental data travels by undersea cable. When you send an email, stream a video, or make a financial transaction, all of that data is traveling through fiber optic lines running along the ocean floor. Europe is particularly dependent upon these cables for everything from the internet to power grid coordination to military communication. Cut enough cables and you are not just disrupting Netflix binges, you are disrupting hospital systems, stock exchanges, emergency services, and military command and control. Armies of the 21st century used to cut telegraph lines before an invasion. But this is way more effective because everyone underestimates their importance if they don't forget they exist altogether. The most devious part is that it is virtually impossible to prove evidence of sabotage. A ship drags an anchor, a cable snaps and breaks. It could absolutely have been an accident, or it could have been deliberate or gross negligence. NATO's response has mirrored its anti-drone aerial patrols, increasing seabed surveillance with more patrol ships, sensors, and monitoring. But the Baltic Sea alone has thousands of kilometers of undersea cables and pipelines. You can't guard all of it. You can't even guard most of it. And Russia knows this. China knows this. Anyone watching is taking notes. Since President Trump and Vladimir Putin met in Anchorage in 2025, Russia has ramped up attacks on Ukrainian cities. It's also crossed a new line by authorizing what appears to be gray zone attacks on NATO countries in Europe for the first time, albeit without casualties. Starting the night of September 9th, Russian drones appeared in Poland, then Romania, Germany, Norway, and Denmark. Planes violated Estonian airspace. Cyber attacks hit targets like Berlin's airport, causing major ongoing disruption. They are stress testing NATO without actually starting World War III, working through Putin's new playbook page by page. This could get scarier if the footnotes of that playbook hint that they have come to the conclusion that Article 5 is just window dressing for the alliance. In other words, all talk and bluster. As transatlantic relations fray, they might have come to the natural conclusion that the United States may not actually sacrifice its own people to defend quote-unquote second-class allies. Right now, Europe is scrambling to ensure they aren't right, so they're testing it. Right now, every single day. The drones, the cable cutting, the cyber attacks, it's like a boxer jabbing his opponent over and over, trying to figure out his defense. Where does he drop his guard? Where does he flinch? How much can you hit him before he hits back? Russia's probing for the exact point where NATO will either defend its members or admit the alliance is hollow. This all brings us back to what has been the crown jewel of decades of Russian operational planning for Eastern Europe, the enlargement and forced seizure of the Suwalki Gap. How would Russia do it? Well, for one, Russia could start by using the Wagner Group operatives posing as Belarusian border guards or migrants to destabilize the region. This would create the pretext Moscow needs. From there, forces from Kaliningrad would push south, while Belarus-based troops strike northwest. Their first move would be to isolate the Polish town of Suwałki and seize control of the nearby forests, creating a defensible position that delays NATO intervention. For Putin, taking control of the Suwałki Gap is a low-cost, high-impact maneuver that could fracture NATO, isolate the Baltics, and even call Article 5 itself into question. Punishingly for NATO, Russia and Belarus would have the advantage of time and space, being the aggressors. They would be able to concentrate maximal power into one place. The same thing was said when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, underestimating Ukraine's ability to resist. NATO's response would be robust, but even a thin line of Russian forces strung across that gap could create a significant barrier to reinforcement. Unless, of course, NATO is prepared to force passage and escalate the crisis. It may seem like an unlikely scenario, but people in Lithuanian towns near the gap are already stockpiling food and water and making evacuation plans. They fear their small towns could become frontline battlegrounds. NATO is not standing still either. Fortunately for those locals, the alliance is building a stronger shield. Since 2017, NATO has stationed 4 multinational battle groups across Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, while Polish and Lithuanian forces train together in the Suwałki Gap. Lithuania is creating a strategic transport corridor, modernizing one of its 2 main roads connecting to Poland to ensure rapid transfer of military equipment. The logistics variable is a big sticking point. Experts have determined that many bridges in these countries can only withstand military vehicles weighing up to 50 tons, the same weight as most Russian vehicles. You get into problematic territory when you realize that modern American and British tanks weigh in at just under 70 tons and won't even be able to cross the vital bridges across the Vistula River. Even with pre-positioning, even with exercises, NATO's decision-making requires consensus among 32 countries. It is inherently slower than Russia's, which requires one guy in the Kremlin. If Russia did block that gap, would NATO really start World War III to reopen it? Would the US really send in the 82nd Airborne to a firefight in northeastern Poland over a place most Americans couldn't even find on the map? Because if the answer is probably not, then Article 5 has already failed. You don't have to invade Europe and break NATO. You just have to prove Article 5 does not mean what it says. Fortunately for NATO, Eastern Europe's shifting geopolitical landscape since 2022 favors the alliance regardless of the prevailing political winds in the United States. Sweden and Finland's membership in NATO limits the importance of the Suwałki Gap because it's only approximately 93 miles from the Swedish island of Gotland to the coast of Latvia, making air and seaborne resupply operations viable. St. Petersburg, Russia's second-largest city, now has NATO on 3 sides. If you want to see why 2025 feels different, let's look at what NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte laid out at Chatham House in June. His speech included stats designed to terrify any NATO member paying attention. Russia's economy is $2 trillion. NATO's is $50 trillion, 25 times larger. Yet that tiny Russian economy is producing ammunition at 4 times the rate of the entire NATO alliance. 4 times. In 3 months, Russia produced what NATO produces in a year. Rutte didn't sugarcoat it. He said Russia's defense industrial base is expected to roll out 1,500 tanks, 3,000 armored vehicles, and 200 Iskander missiles in this year alone. Russia could pose a direct threat to NATO members within the next 3 to 5 years, or NATO speak for very, very soon. So NATO is finally waking up. At the June 2025 Hague Summit, all 32 allies committed to something unprecedented, an investment of 5% of GDP annually on defense by 2035, 3.5% for core defense requirements like troops and weapons, and 1.5% for infrastructure, cybersecurity, civil preparedness, and resilience. Mark Rutte credited President Trump with this outcome, and he might be right. In 2025, all allies are expected to meet the previous 2% target, notable considering only 3 allies met that target in 2014. 5% has to make a big difference in NATO hardware. The alliance currently needs a 400% increase in air and missile defense systems. That is 5 times what they have now. They need thousands more armored vehicles and tanks, millions more artillery shells, and double their enabling capabilities like logistics, supply, transportation, and medical support. America's allies alone will procure at least 700 F-35 fighter jets. Rutte, however, was also blunt about production bottlenecks. Patriot missile systems, the West's most vital air defense weapon, take nearly a decade to deliver. Start today and you'll see them in 10 years. Meanwhile, Russia might be ready to attack in 5. That math doesn't work, and NATO knows it. The alliance now has brigade-level forces that can deploy in 48 hours, which is down from 2 weeks it previously targeted. Ammunition is pre-stocked near flashpoints, bridges and roads near the Russian border have been surveyed and reinforced. To handle heavy military traffic, troops can move through multiple NATO countries without waiting for diplomatic clearances. Everything is pre-positioned, pre-planned, and ready to go. Yes, NATO is on a hair trigger. When you compress response time from weeks to hours, you also compress decision time. The old Cold War had built-in pauses, time to mobilize, time to think, time for diplomacy to work. Now, Rutte put it plainly, the distance between European capitals is only a matter of minutes, with modern Russian missiles that travel at many times the speed of sound. He did not mince words. Right now, both sides are trying to read each other's poker faces, and neither is entirely sure the other is playing the same game. None of what Russia has done has technically violated any agreements, it's all signaling. But it is signaling expressly designed to make NATO think twice about any move that Russia could characterize as aggressive. Western intelligence agencies call it persistent strategic ambiguity, which is a fancy way of saying Russia keeps everyone confused on purpose. One day, Russian media says NATO is on the brink of collapse, divided and weak. The next day, they say NATO is an existential threat bent on Russia's destruction. Both narratives serve Russian interests, so both get promoted simultaneously. For NATO decision-makers, this is maddening. How do you deter an adversary when you're not sure whether they're confident or paranoid? How do you send clear signals when the other side interprets everything through a lens of assumed hostility? Well, you can't. And that is the environment where a single bad day, whether it be a miscommunication, an accident, or a local commander who makes the wrong call, can spiral out of control before cooler heads can intervene. War isn't imminent because anyone is planning it, it's imminent because all the pieces are in place for it to happen by accident. And accidents happen every day. Thanks again to Supremacy World War III for supporting the channel. Click the link in the description to download the game for free and claim your $25 starter pack, including that exclusive seasonal unit, only available for the next 30 days. Tensions between NATO and Russia are reaching a breaking point, but what if conflict erupted? Watch what would happen if Russia and NATO went to war day by day to see how the conflict could unfold, or click on this video instead.